Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Cornwall. I call this meeting of the Standing Committee of Finance and Economic Affairs to order. We are meeting here today to resume public hearings on pre-budget consultations 2024. The clerk of the committee has distributed committee documents, including written submissions, via SharePoint. As a reminder, each presenter will have 7 minutes for their presentations. And after we've heard from all the presenters, the remaining 39 minutes of the time slot will be for questions from the members of the committee. This time for the questions will be divided into 2 rounds of 7.5 minutes for the government members, 2 rounds of 7.5 minutes for the official opposition members, and 2 rounds of 4.5 minutes for the independent members as a group. And with that, our first panel today is Cornwall and District Real Estate Board, Nina Deeb, and the Ontario Council of Hospital Unions, CUPE. And I believe we're all at the table ready to go. So just a couple of comments. In your 7-minute presentation at 6 minutes, I will say 1 minute. Don't stop, but when I say thank you, stop because it's all over. Also want to remind you that the microphones are automatically activated by, well, it's not quite automatic, but by the good folks that we have at the back. Don't sit too close to the mic and don't fuss with the buttons. So with that, we now will start the presentations first we'll hear from the Cornwall and District Real Estate Board. Start the presentation with introducing yourself for the answer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Lyle Warden. I'm a realtor here in STNG. We're actually sitting in South Glengarry, just on the east side of Cornwall. Members of the committee, thank you very much for taking the time to hear from us today. As I said, my name is Lyle Warden. I am representing the Cornwall and District Real Estate Board's 200 members. I want to express my gratitude to all of you for your unwavering dedication to addressing the housing needs in Cornwall, our surrounding region, and throughout the province. It comes as no surprise to anyone present that the housing affordability crisis remains a significant concern for residents from Brockville to Cornwall to Hawkesbury and beyond. We can all think of someone in our own community, maybe even our family, who are diligently following the right steps, securing well-paying jobs, working hard, saving responsibly, and making sound financial decisions. Yet the dream of home ownership remains elusive for many. As realtors, we witness this situation firsthand on a daily basis and understand the urgency of implementing effective solutions to alleviate the housing crisis we currently face. Home ownership plays a pivotal role in fostering prosperous communities. Beyond encouraging retirement savings and improving children's performance in schools, it supports families and contributes to the development of stronger communities. Additionally, the housing and real estate sectors generate billions of dollars in economic growth and supports tens of thousands of jobs across this province. Unfortunately, there has been a gradual decline in home ownership across the province in recent years, exacerbated by economic factors such as unprecedented inflation and multiple interest rate hikes. Despite these challenges, household incomes have not kept pace, resulting in a staggering 180% increase in housing costs over the last decade. While Ontario strives to be an excellent place to live, conduct business, and raise a family, the rising costs of housing and its lack of affordability are prompting many families to consider leaving the province in search of more affordable housing elsewhere. To address this crisis, we believe the 2024 budget must bring a change in outlook and instill hope among Ontario families. Today, we present 3 key solutions to tackle the current housing affordability crisis. In various municipalities within Eastern Ontario, numerous development units face prolonged delays due to a continuous stream of objections. Despite receiving approval from the Municipal Council, the projects are subject to repeated objections, causing significant delays lasting for months or even years. To address this issue, we propose a comprehensive approach. One, reform the Ontario Land Tribunal. Prevent abuse of the system, eliminate backlog through efficient processing, allow fines for unwarranted delays to expedite the development timeline. This exact scenario happened here in South Glengarry while I was mayor. There was a proposed project 20 minutes down the highway, and it fit all the criteria, zoning, everything, and some NIMBYs just decided to hold it up, delayed it by almost 3 years, and I bet it cost the developer over $1 million. For what? No, they had no legitimate reason other than they didn't want it. So, huge problem. Two, implement land use changes to eliminate exclusionary zoning. Introduce modifications to land use policies to put an end to exclusionary zoning practices. By understanding these reforms, we aim to streamline the development process, ensuring that approved projects move forward without unnecessary hindrance, fostering timely and effective growth throughout Ontario. Exclusionary zoning practices are prevalent in various regions across Ontario, restricting the types of housing permitted in designated areas. Transforming a single-family home into a low-rise apartment within such zone involves navigating a protracted and intricate approval process. While the introduction of Bill 23, the More Homes Built Faster Act, in 2022 marked a significant step in curbing exclusionary zoning, further action is imperative to effectively address the ongoing crisis. We urge the Ontario government to embrace as-of-right zoning, enabling the unimpeded development of missing middle housing throughout the province, devoid of bureaucratic hurdles and prolonged approval procedures. Recognizing that thriving communities necessitate a diverse housing mix, encompassing low-rise apartments, duplexes, townhouses, and single-family homes, we advocate for a comprehensive approach. This broad spectrum of housing options empowers families to discover residents that align with their needs at affordable price points. Challenging exclusionary zoning by allowing as-of-right zoning to facilitate the development of missing middle housing without challenge exclusionary zoning by allowing as-of-right zoning to facilitate the development of missing middle housing without bureaucratic obstacles. Support the full spectrum of housing, including low-rise apartments, duplexes, townhouses, and single-family homes to meet diverse needs at affordable prices. In 2023, CIBC report released last year.
1 minute.
1/5 of Canada's construction workforce is nearing retirement. 300,000 workers are projected to retire in the coming decade, and there are currently over 80,000 vacancies in skilled trades labor force. Ontarians are depending on their government to increase funding for skilled trades to meet the goal of building 1.5 million homes over the next decade. We encourage the Ontario government to increase funding for skilled trade programs in colleges, trade schools, and apprenticeship programs. In conclusion, Ontario's housing crisis is reaching historic levels, but we believe that implementing the discussed changes will bring us closer to a solution. Thank you for your time, and I'm available to address any of your questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation. We'll now hear from Nina Deep.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. My name is Nina Deeb. I'm a full-time real estate broker since 1996. Government has an opportunity to address the concerns of the people of Ontario through funding. The federal government has allocated $117.5 billion specifically for housing. Housing is provincial jurisdiction. Ontario must ensure this funding is being downloaded to those that have the responsibility to build, retain, and repair Ontario's deeply affordable housing stock. The recipients of this funding must only be the people of Ontario or municipalities. This taxpayer funding is being captured by pension funds, financial landlords, and real estate investment trusts. Municipalities are seeking financial relief from the province. Some of the financial shortfalls they're experiencing are a direct result of provincial legislation. Nutrition for Learning experienced food cost increases of 90% last year. Canada is a wealthy country. Food insecurity is due to corporate misconduct and taxation inequality. It is a result of rents, utilities, interest rates, and home costs having tripled. Household incomes have not kept up. Some households are spending 100% of their incomes on their housing. In 1996, there were 13 competing grocers in Canada. This has been reduced to 5. Loblaws, Sobeys, Metro, Walmart, and Costco. The Affordable Housing and Groceries Act will do the exact opposite of its title. It will concentrate powers and increase the profits of the corporations at the top even more. The legislation makes housing and groceries more expensive. Overpriced food has led to hunger and waste. Corporations are destroying food in their compactors. Corporations are creating serious food insecurity for Canadians while operating as real estate investment trusts. REITs and pension funds are operating as asset managers of real estate. They do not pay taxes in Canada. This has a corrosive effect on what remains in our local markets to circulate. This money leaves the area it's generated in and reduces the prosperity of the local population, sending their labor to other countries through rent collection. Wealthy corporations are destroying the food that humans need to live. These corporations are being rewarded with tax exemptions and sole source contracts. The favoritism of corporations over people must end. Corporations do not live. They do not need houses. They do not need food. Humans must have housing and food in order to live. Corporations cannot be trusted with Ontario's housing or food supplies. Ontario has a growing new field of colleges, councils, and associations that claim to be protecting the interest of the public. These organizations do not pay taxes. Some are collecting $1 million per employee while claiming to be not-for-profit. These organizations are being carried by the taxpayers of Ontario and Canada. These non-government organizations are a shadow government that we did not elect. Delegation to private corporations must be rescinded. These capitalist enterprises only take. They bring nothing to the table. These corporations are capitalist entities that employ the politicians that created them when they were elected members of Parliament. They must be abolished. Revenue. Some corporations are paying reduced taxes, some pay no taxes, and some are reaching into the collection basket to cover their own operations. With self-regulation, my organized industry severed itself into two and transformed itself from a trade organization grossing $3 million a year to a profit powerhouse that's grossing over $70 million annually. It only has 70 employees. This is the size of a Tim Hortons grossing $70 million a year and not paying taxes. This corporation, the regulator also does not pay taxes. Their landlord does not pay taxes. Their landlord is Starlight Real Estate Investment Trust, which is otherwise known as Blackstone. The spin-off business ideas don't pay taxes. The idea to exempt one corporation from taxation has been extended and has grown into 108 corporations that do not contribute anything to the budget that we're trying to make stretch today. Their network of businesses have surpassed $1 billion a year. They're local organizations with transnational interests. They lobby to defund Ontario, Canada, municipalities, and taxpayers. They are transferring their tax responsibilities to the people of Ontario. The Travel Authority must reimburse the people of Ontario $10.1 million and repay the compensation fund the $30 million they have spent. This delegated authority does not have the authority to spend the Consumers' Compensation Fund. The 407 operators owe the people of Ontario $1 billion. I would like to ask for to support the public libraries in their requests. They've been asking for many years for increases. They haven't had increases in 25 years. The budget request for provincial library grant is supported. The request for an Ontario Digital Library is supported. This will increase library services to all of Ontario, expanding access to rural areas that do not have this benefit now, or any library benefits now. An annual First Nations library grant is also supported. Library investments complement the education investments that Ontario makes. Ontario uploaded education Libraries were left behind, which is fine, but they need funding. This is a
minute.
very small request. Request for budget allocations for $60 billion to be downloaded to the 444 municipalities. This funding is required to set up acquisition funds to build social and cooperative housing. Ontario needs deeply affordable housing. When the federal government and the province retreated from home building, 17,000 approved homes were not built in Ontario. The housing deficit continues to grow. Please keep the municipalities, the delivery of social support, service supports, healthcare, and libraries at the top of your budget considerations. We're a wealthy province, and we can afford all the programs that we have. We need tax reform to capture the corporate malfeasance that is pushing up the costs of housing and groceries. Ontario can remove the tax incentives that encourage this bad conduct. These players must contribute to the pot. We need more money. Corporations must be banned from real estate
Very much.
ownership.
That concludes the time. We'll now go to the Ontario Council of Hospital Unions, CUPE.
Great, thank you. My name is Doug Allen. I'm a research representative with CUPE. Regrets for Michael Hurley, our president, who can't be here today. You're stuck with me, unfortunately. OCHU represents 40,000 hospital workers in Ontario. We're currently in central bargaining with closely collaborating with the Service Employees International Union and Unifor. In total, there'll be well over 70,000 workers at hospitals and some long-term care workers that will be affected. Today, I'd like to talk about the staffing capacity crisis in our hospitals, the causes and consequences, what is needed to resolve this, both in terms of improved staffing and improved capacity in the hospital system for workers and for patients and families. Inadequate staffing. Currently, Ontario, compared to the rest of Canada, has, the other provinces have 18% more hospital staff per capita than in Ontario. That put a number to that, 33,778 more full-time equivalent positions. Huge. That's the biggest chunk of that is for inpatient services, for nursing and inpatient services at about 16,000. Also support workers, about 8,000 missing. And on page 2 of the brief, you'll see that the various categories that occurred. This occurs despite the fact that we're actually high in a couple of areas. In terms of research, not surprising. There's been a long-term decline in spending on compensation workers in the hospital system in Ontario. This has gone on from at least 2005, 2006. We went from 64% of total hospital spending down to 59%. This isn't something intrinsic to hospitals. The very opposite trend is happening in the rest of the country. It's been going up from 65 to 67%. This is unique to Ontario and is part of the problem. You'll see that those charts are set out in page 3 of the brief. The staffing crisis has been worsened by the fact that hospital and healthcare workers have not kept pace with other wages. And at the bottom of page 5, you'll see the chart where healthcare and social assistance wages is a category that Stats Canada has started out 65 cents per hour more than the average industrial wage in 2017 and are now $2.12 less. Big change in their relative position of where they were. In average hourly increase for all industries, 7.5%. For health social assistance workers, 16.9%. The general wage increase for hospital workers that's been negotiated is much less, 12%. Been very harsh austerity, very hard bargaining from this government over that period. Far behind. We have had some other changes because of the staffing crisis. We had the government was forced to introduce a $2 PSW wage increase. We bargained a $2 increase for RPNs. There's more RPN usage. That's driven up wages overall. The hospitals tell us it's actually gone up about the same as health and social assistance wages, about 17%. That's still 10% behind the increase that we've seen for all industries. hospital work has become much less attractive over a very, very short period of time. We're now $4.41 behind the average industrial wage for the average service worker in Ontario. We were 59 cents above. Now, just 6 years later, $4.49 less. Results, huge increase in job vacancies in hospitals. We've gone from you'll see the chart on page 4, from actually being above the all-industry average, below the all-industry average, to being way above the all-industry average in terms of job vacancies. We've gone from 4,000 job vacancies in hospitals to now 21,885 job vacancies in Ontario hospitals. Labor market's destroyed, totally destroyed. Consequences of the staffing and capacity crisis, you guys hear about it almost every day in the news. ER closures, hundreds, totally unprecedented. The number of people being treated in hallways in hospitals has exploded since 2018, a key year, obviously. We've gone from 1,289 patients in hallways to now 1,374 patients in hallway. A significant increase. We've got other developments, 4,500 fewer surgeries per month than existed in 2019. Wait times are 49% longer than 2019. This is all according to the Financial Accountability Office. 107,000 patients are waiting longer than the maximum clinical guidelines. The maximum clinical guidelines. 7.7% fewer beds than exist per capita in the rest of Canada. And it's going to get worse. We're already being driven by respiratory illnesses in our hospitals right now. We have 1,400 patients in hospitals with beds, with COVID. We've returned to the regular COVID area. We're going to have a huge population growth increase over the next little while. That is, we believe, will drive, with the aging that's going on in the population, about a 2.18% increase in need over the next little while. We need to address this. We need to address it through better wages for hospital workers. We're in bargaining right now. We believe we need a pattern towards the top end of the bargaining pattern right now, and we need to deal with increasing the staff and the capacity of the hospital system. We think we can achieve a 5% increase in capacity per year. That would help to both deal with the growth in demand that's driven by aging and population, and begin to address the capacity crisis that we currently have. Thank you.
Time, and we now will start with the questions with the official opposition. MPP Palsma.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much to all the witnesses for being here. We really appreciate you taking the time to come and share your insights with the committee. I'm going to be spending most of my time on the hospital crisis, not because the crisis in housing and groceries is not also very important. We have many crises in the province right now. But Doug, was there anything else you wanted to share with the committee since you got cut off there?
Okay, thank you. Well, our estimate of staff needed, given that what we say is, resolving the crisis and resolving and dealing with the push from population and aging, the aging is growing at about twice the rate of population. Population is actually growing much faster than projected by the government, although even with the government's estimates, it's growing at a very significant pace. Our estimate of the actual staff needed is about 60,000 staff in hospitals over the next 4 years, 14,500 per year in the first year, and a little bit more in each year after that. That would begin to address the vacancies that we have in our hospital system, and begin to address the capacity crunch that we have in the hospital system. There's no easy way out of this system. We have seen some significant efforts to increase other parts of the healthcare system, but those won't keep up. The government, under pressure, I would submit, from CUPE and others, and the Health Coalition and many others, has agreed to increase staffing in long-term care to 4 hours, something we'd like to see in hospitals, something we'd like to negotiate and discuss with government about that, improving those staffing levels, achieving that definite staffing level so that people feel that they can have a decent job where there's not violence in the workplace. We have the highest violence level of any industry in the hospital sector, a female-dominant industry. It's not police, it's not fire, it's not paramedics, it's hospital workers who get that terrible incidents of violence and the terrible workload that comes with this, that where people's morale is terrible and people leave the industry. So we're looking at a sort of a twofold solution, both increase capacity, make the jobs more attractive again, but also reverse the policy of wage suppression and make the jobs more attractive to people so we can actually fill those job vacancies once again. So those would be key things. I would just say on the long-term care and the home care improvements that the incapacity that have been brought, that because of the aging and population growth that we see, it won't actually improve the bed capacity in long-term care or the hour capacity in home care. In home care, we're actually, even with $1 billion that the government has promised over 3 years, according to the FAO, that will actually lead to a 1% reduction in capacity per year relative to the 65-plus population. That population is exploding, and the oldest part of that population is exploding even quicker. Those guys drive the need for health care. 60% of our hospital beds are used by people 65 and older, and it's even greater for the 75-plus and 90-plus population, which is growing much more rapidly. We're dealing with a sort of like a wartime situation that we need a wartime response in order to improve the capacity and make the hospitals a better place to live. Just to give an example, I don't want to belabor this too long, Chandra, but just even where there's been a significant promise and to increase long-term care capacity by, I think, 31,000 beds, that, according to the FAO, the Financial Accountability Office, will actually not improve the number of beds relative to the population 75 plus. The beds are totally driven by the number of people who are 75 and older, that it actually increases it, I think, by 0.1% per year by the time we're at the end. So we're not going to get any relief from home care. That we're going to get more pressure from home care under the current plans. I mean, plans can be improved, and I encourage them to be improved. But we're actually going to have just a tiny improvement of capacity in long-term care. It won't address the 40,000 person wait list. Anyway, I don't want to hog all the time.
Well,
sorry.
No, we certainly appreciate your insights, and you've painted a very stark picture for us this morning. You've painted a very stark picture of the current vacancies and the trends we're facing now, but CUPE also just did some recent polling of your workforce that really suggests if we don't do something, we're in very deep trouble. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, that was very interesting because it was a poll, a fairly simple poll, and it really did catch the zeitgeist. I think we got 1,000 media stories out of that simple poll. It's not often we do research that gets that sort of attention. But what it showed is that people are dreading work in a very significant way. Many are thinking of leaving their jobs. People are sleepless at night. They go to work with the churning in their stomach because people, they're working short staff. Somebody doesn't show up because they just can't take it or whatever. And they work short staff. The patients are unhappy. The families are very unhappy and crazy sometimes, and it creates this system where we do have this almost unknown fact that it's the female hospital workers that are bearing the biggest share of violence in their workplace. It ain't the police. It ain't the firefighters. It isn't even the paramedics. It's the hospital and long-term care workers that are really getting beat up on the job. If you look at the WSIB stats on that. Sorry, Chandra.
You know, it's fair to say, well, first of all, we're at
minute.
risk of losing another half of our workforce, our existing workforce, if we don't do anything. We're also asking individuals to pay an incredible price every day for refusing to address wages and the staffing vacancies. But also, you know, when you're listing longer wait times, the number of patients whose wait times are exceeding clinical guidelines, patients in hallways, we're actually pushing people to a point where they're going to need more extensive medical interventions, more health care. So, you know, as a witness said the other day in Brockville, this is waste through poor planning. We're actually ending up spending more by not spending up front and making sure people are getting timely health care.
Exactly. 100%. That is, it's sort of a two-sided crisis. There's the workplace crisis that we've tried to talk about, but also, and very greatly, there is this this patient crisis. And I think there is the sense right now that things have never been this bad.
Thank you very much. That concludes the time. And the independent MPP Collard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I also want to extend my warm appreciations for you coming here. We always learn a lot, you know, from presentation for people that are in the sector and living the experience that we need to take into consideration when the government is making decisions. Just to continue a little bit on the trend of the healthcare crisis and the staffing crisis capacity in particular, which you know, very well explained. And I think it's very clear that it's a questions of attracting more people in the sector, but also the retention. And I believe, because I know some nurses and people that are in the sector, that the working conditions are a big part of that problem, of you know, the challenge that we have. Can you speak more about what we need to do to improve the working conditions of those workers so that they are motivated to stay and that we can attract more people?
Excellent question. We have raised this in bargaining with the Ontario Hospital Associations, and our sister unions, Unifor and Service Employees, likewise have raised this. What we have called for is staffing ratios, not unlike what the government's already agreed to in long-term care. It would vary, obviously, by the different nature of the patient. We've made a proposal on this, and we've also invited the government to meet with us to discuss this issue in a way that we can, you know, sort of work on it together with the government and, of course, with the opposition parties to help resolve that issue. But unfortunately, to date, we have heard nothing back from that letter that was sent from the three unions that are in bargaining. We hope to make progress on this in this round of bargaining that would, you know, begin to address that staffing and capacity issue and develop a system where people felt that when they went to work, it wasn't a crisis every day, that they actually had the staff necessary to deal with this. We understand we're not going to solve the problem overnight. We hope we're not making, you know, unrealistic or you know, just, you know, ideal solutions. But we do want to make progress. We hope to make progress in this round. It was done in long-term care when there was significant concern about what was happening in long-term care that became very evident of that. We had campaigned with the community for about 10 or 15 years to get the 4 hours of care per resident per day. We were heartened when the government did move on that and introduced it. We haven't yet seen that in the actual staffing hours. The actual staffing hours of RNs and RPNs is actually decreased in long-term care, which is kind of shocking because the industry's gotten a lot more money, and that's a concern. But it's not the first time that employers call for more money and in the guise of it's going to go to the workers, and in fact it doesn't work out that way. That's something we want to work on with the government. Sorry, I'll turn it back to you in case you.
Yeah, I'll ask a quick question. Maybe you can answer in you know, other questions. So we're seeing a privatization of part of our healthcare system, and maybe you can think about explaining what the impact is on that staffing crisis capacity in our hospitals.
Yeah. It's a major concern. Budgeted funding for the for-profit industries, the independent health facilities and so forth, went up 212% in the last budget. 212%. It's not going to make a difference because that part of the industry is so small. It's just a tiny little fraction of hospitals. It can't resolve the capacity crisis in the shorter medium term. But hospital budget funding went up 0.5%. 212%.
Thank you very much.
Sorry.
That concludes the time. MPP Jordan.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you all for your presentations. I want to speak and direct my question to Lyle. Thanks very much. Your presentation seemed to echo a lot what the government has focused on and has prioritized. I've actually been in this area 4 times now, cutting ribbons on new long-term care homes as the PA to long-term care, and breaking ground on others and priority fund announcements. So it's a great time for long-term care and moving those homes, and there is a housing component to that, as you know, and it'll free up other homes. My question is around your tribunal part of your presentation. So the Attorney General's added about 40 new adjudicators, and he streamlined an electronic system. And there has been a significant improvement in the wait times for people getting through the tribunal. So I'm wondering here in the Cornwall area if you've experienced improvements in that process.
So thank you for the question. I haven't firsthand heard of any improvements, but we were aware of the investments that were made. I think the problem is there's just been such a long backlog that I think it's going to take a little more for the results to be seen in this area. I can only refer to that one instance that I referred to in my speech, where it was again during the pandemic, and it was very painful. But we are happy with the investments that the government has been making, and we just hope that it's continued and we will see the improvements.
Yeah, thanks.
MPP Hogarth.
Thank you, Chair. And I just want to thank everyone for being here today and for your presentations. And Nina, I have some good news for you. The City of Toronto is actually opening up more libraries on Sundays. I know you mentioned that's in our municipal budget, but it also comes at a 17%, almost 70% property tax hike. So, but we are going to be having more libraries open on Sunday. My question's really as for Lyle as well as a realtor. You know, the market's been tough lately over the last little bit. Can you just explain to you, in your professional opinion, just a little bit about how realtors can help with the housing crisis?
Well, I advocate on behalf of my clients every day. The biggest hurdle lately has been the interest rate. It's just gutted the market. You know, it has allowed for the prices to come down, and you know, it's been a more balanced market where buyers are allowed to do their due diligence. They don't have to put a cash offer, but we're still seeing multiple offers. And I think the biggest hurdle is the interest rate at this time. People's buying power is just eroded. 2 years ago, $100,000 income, whatever that netted them, buying power it's been dropped significantly. So they're just not able to afford what they could have 2 years ago. And the market still has a lot of buyers that were not successful throughout the pandemic. So I would say as realtors, I mean, I work hard every day for my clients, but there's no magic solution. I feel that if the interest rates were lowered, I think it would certainly help more folks get into homes.
And we also agree. And it's the affordability crisis on various fronts, as we mentioned, food and, purchasing homes. So what we're working on at the government is we have a couple of pieces of legislation. One was the Building Faster Fund. Have you heard of that fund that was introduced in the fall?
I didn't, I'm sorry.
Okay, so there's a Building Faster Fund, and we're also removing the HST on new purpose-built rental for housing. Can you tell us a little bit about how that will help with the housing crisis, and what kind of effect will that have?
Well, I think that along with the exclusionary zoning being a thing, I think you're going to see more purpose-built homes, more multi-unit developments happening. And I think if you can build, increase the housing on an existing sewer line, where a single-family home was, and you can put up to like a fourplex, it's not costing you not costing the municipalities any more money for infrastructure because it's so darn expensive to replace and to build. I think that, and also the removal of the HST and the PST off of that, it's going to encourage that type of development, and it's what we need. We need diversified development. All around us here in this municipality, there's very, very little mixed development. They're all single-family homes, and it can't continue that way. It needs to be mixed where you have sixplexes, townhouses, single families. It just needs to be mixed to get the densification up.
That's a great answer. My final question is around property taxes. Obviously, those are municipal. And what type of effect will that have now when you're a renter, you're not technically paying property tax, but what effect do you think that would have, like a double digits, like almost 17% if the feds don't come to the table, property tax? How will that affect renters, or do you think it will affect renters?
Absolutely it will. I mean, the taxes have to get paid somehow. So that's a whole other subject per se. There's problems with the landlord tribunal that would make it worse. The renters at the end of the day will pay the taxes. Landlords are finding ways, not all of them are maybe above board and following the rules exactly, but a lot of them, at the end of the day, the tenants will pay the taxes in some way, shape, or form.
Falls on their shoulders.
1 minute.
Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, I do want to say that I feel that this government has done a great job of putting legislation in putting it out there, like with the Bill 23, I think it was last year, building more homes faster. It's a great first step, and I think addressing the exclusionary zoning, I think, is going to do wonders for getting densified development.
Well, we all know there is a housing crisis, and it takes 3 levels of government to make that happen, and we need partners like yourself to make that happen for our citizens. So thank you. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you. We'll now go to the official opposition, MPP Harden.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. And as we get started, can I just quickly offer a public thanks to all the MTO workers out there salting the roadways that made sure our buses and our cars could get here. We had occasion to talk to one of those folks who work in security in Brockville, I know, but thank you to all those families. Thank you to all those workers. Okay, let's get started, Ms. Deeb, talking a little bit about the housing crisis and some of the information you presented this morning. I've been at committee before, and I've heard you talk about worries with respect to real estate investment trusts. When we met in Brockville, we had occasion to hear from an organization representing asset managers, hedge funds, private equity firms, managing allocations of less than $1 billion. And their worry was that if there's not a focused attempt to understand how massive capital managers are entering into the Canadian space, we are not going to be in control of important sectors of our economy. This is advice coming to us from Bay Street, to be clear, okay? So one of the things I noticed, and it's a company you've mentioned in the past, Blackstone, has made a big buy in Toronto, taking up a $3.5 billion play in Tricor, which, as was pointed out when we brought this up in Brockville, has a significant imprint in American housing, but it also has significant ownership in Toronto real estate housing, in particular modest income and low income rental. So what we heard yesterday from the Alliance to End Homelessness in Ottawa is that for every 1 unit of affordable housing we're building in our economy, we are losing 7, just because the nature of housing, the cost of rent at the moment is $2,000 a month in our city in Ottawa. It's even higher in places like Toronto. I'd be interested to know in this area what rent looks like now compared to 4 or 5 years ago. The cost of a house has doubled since this government came to power first in 2018 to now. So I'm worried about the activity of real estate investment trusts because I'm aware of the fact that one country, Denmark, had to pass a specific law, which lawmakers in that country called the Blackstone Law, that was basically targeted towards huge acquisitions of multiple apartment buildings that forbade rent increases for 5 years when big acquisitions like that happened, so rents weren't driven up. In some cases in that country, rents went up 250%. 250%. So long-serving tenants were pushed out, modest changes were made, and rents were jacked up. As you're looking at the information you presented to the committee this morning, are you worried, are you still worried about the activities of real estate investment trusts and what it will do to make the housing crisis worse?
Thank you for the question. I am worried enough about the activity of real estate investment trusts and pension funds in Canada that I have in my 14 recommendations to government on making housing affordable. I have recommended for probably about 3 years now to ban them. I think that real estate investment trusts should be banned in Canada. The Blackstone is banned not in other countries as well. They have brought in legislation, Europe, I think it was Netherlands. So it's important to realize that there's different names they're operating under within the different countries, and sometimes it looks like it's a repatriation between the local corporation and Blackstone when they come in and take over. Quite often they're taking over 30,000, 60,000 units at a time. So they bought in one lump block purchase, I think it was around 1,600 units in my region. They are the top real estate landlord in Waterloo region is Blackstone. And I have taken inventory of every high-rise building in Waterloo region.
So moving, Mr. Warden, over to you. First of all, thank you for representing realtors this morning. I can totally sympathize with what you're talking about in how difficult it is in the current environment. But I was also intrigued by what you said about the Landlord-Tenant Board. I'm hearing it from renters, I'm hearing it from small landlords, and it seems to be the only people who are happy with the status quo are the large real estate investment trusts that are very happy if there are long delays because tenants won't file complaints and they'll simply move out if they're incentivized to do so with a cash payout or if they just give up. We literally have a case that we're working on right now in our office where elderly tenants of an apartment building that was recently bought by a REIT have had their power shut off. And we've had to call Ottawa bylaw into the site to make sure the power is restored. So just aggressive tactics to incentivize people who won't move out if they're given financial incentives to do so in situations like, I believe, unlawful situations. So could you just, for the benefit of the committee, explain if the goal that I understand the Landlord-Tenant Tribunal set in 22-23 is to have a hearing within 50 days. The goal previous to that, 2 years previous to that, was 25 days. So could you just, from the standpoint of a realtor, whether one's in the ownership market or in the rental market, or you're a small landlord trying to operate a successful rental property, how important is it to make sure that people can get ready access to a complaint, be they a landlord or a tenant?
Thank you for the question. I couldn't agree with you more. There's cases of bad actors on both sides, and I think that having access to a situation where in a timely fashion, it has to happen. So I'll give you a specific example. I sold a house with a tenant inside of it. The purchaser is buying the house for their son, so it's a legitimate N12 eviction notice. The tenant hasn't moved out yet, refuses to move out. And it's like, so it's holding up the deal. So it's a legitimate situation where this is something that happened. So stay tuned, it hasn't closed yet, but we're hearing up to 6 months at the tribunal right now. So it's not fair for the seller who legitimately has a right to sell their home, and it's not fair to the buyer. I sympathize and empathize with the tenant, but they don't own the property. And I think another issue that needs to be addressed is the fact that at some point there needs to be a reset of the rents. If a tenant lives at a place for 20 years, the provincial yearly whatever they allow to go up by, it's not enough. In all actual, like I'm a landlord, I own, I think I get 8 doors. it's not enough to increase to keep up with the actual cost of living. So like right now, I've got a couple mortgages that are coming due. The interest rates are going to be double. I can't double the rent. And not saying that I should double the rent, but I think there needs to be a realistic, balanced approach to...
In my last 30 seconds here, if you don't mind, just
Yep.
wrap up, because we'll have another opportunity to discuss this, and I hope we can exchange cards to talk
Yes,
about it afterwards.
absolutely.
But we certainly do need more due process, don't we?
100%.
To make sure that if it's a landlord, if a tenant has a significant, they shouldn't be waiting for 6 months. That makes zero sense. So 40 adjudicators is great. It would be great, Chair, just for the record, if it could only be online. Because people for whom the internet is not their strategy, they need an in-person hearing to have access to justice, whether they're a landlord or a tenant. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to the independent MPP Collard.
Thank you, Chair. I'll continue with you, Mr. Warden, because you did speak about the need to reform the Ontario Land Tribunal, and I totally agree, and most of our tribunals have backlog that have negative impacts on the lives of everybody. It's costing the system money, it's costing people a lot of anguish, and mental health issues arise from that. I'm just wondering, and it's maybe something I missed, but you know, while I agree that we need to improve the Ontario Land Tribunal process, how do you see that would impact the price of housing? Do you see a link, or you're just talking about the need to do that?
I think there's two sides to that. I think it is going to. I think it would prevent the large corporations that are buying these big buildings and doing these mass evictions. I think eventually it will get to less of that, because if it's reformed and there's a more reasonable approach to how the rents are able to be increased over time, I think it'll slow down that. It probably will put the rents up higher, but the fact of the matter is it's costing everybody more to live, including landlords.
Ms. Deeb, did you want to react to that? I saw you taking notes.
About the OLT?
Yeah.
Well, we would have quicker builds and we would have less time. Time is money. So if we could have some reform to the Ontario Land Tribunal, but one of the best things that we could do is we need more adjudicators. So the Ontario Tribunal Watch has been publishing for about 6 years now that the tribunal, the adjudicators positions are being left open, and it was taken 8 months for a landlord and tenant hearing. The last number I got from my client, it took them 8 months to get a hearing.
Right. And while the digitization of process can save some time, would you agree that it's not for everybody, and that there still needs to be capacity for people to appear before, like, the board itself?
Absolutely. In-person hearings must always exist. Like, it's fantastic that we have the privilege of having digital, electronic, but in-person is always more effective. I drove here 5.5 hours today, all night, so that I could appear in person. There's a reason I do that. It's definitely more effective. So I've proven that point, I think.
Thank you so much. How much, Nigel?
1.3.
Okay, and just maybe a last questions for you, Mr. Allen. So the pandemic has, increased tremendously the challenges that, we see in their healthcare system. Do you feel, based on the bills and the decisions, the policies that government has made, do you feel that we've learned from the pandemic and that we're doing things differently based on those lessons?
No, I don't think I don't think I do. The capacity problems that have been
1 minute.
So much to the fore previously got significantly worse under in the last few years. The plan that exists to improve capacity falls far short of what is actually needed, given both the increased incidence of respiratory illnesses and the growing and aging population. I think the promise is 3,000 beds over 10 years. That's an 8.4% increase in capacity. population itself will be double that almost. And then there's a whole other increase that is due to the aging. So we need to rethink the whole capacity issue. We need to recognize that there's a crisis existent now that has to be resolved, that we need extra capacity to deal with that. And
Thank you very much. We'll now go to MPP Breezy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I greatly appreciate all of you being here today. Mr. Warden, you and I have something in common. We are both former municipal heads, and so I know that brings a different perspective, and I greatly appreciate the idea that as in your presentation, you brought forward suggestions, proposals. It's always better to come with ideas, and I do appreciate that. One of the things that I was thinking about, and again, we often end up talking about very large corporations and very large apartment owners and things of that nature. But you and I live in a different world than that. We live in the rural space or the small community space where there are not a lot of large corporate landlords in the residential sectors, certainly. One of the things that I'm seeing in my area that has created a fairly significant change to our real estate market is, in my community, there is a whole bunch of those 1970s and 80s 2,000 square foot bungalows. They're incredibly common across Ontario, especially in the smaller communities, that a lot of them were bought into by people in their 20s and 30s. They are now in their 70s or 80s. They're moving out of them because there's a lot of maintenance, et cetera, that is required for that. That housing market, those houses becoming available to the market, we are seeing a tremendous number of them being picked up by local people, right, and being converted into a couple or three apartment units in that rental market. In most cases, again, these are not large corporations that are doing this. These are quite often local tradespeople who are investing in themselves, investing in the community, and providing that extra rental space. One of the tools, and you mentioned it before, the Bill 23 and the availability for 3 units as of right in those spaces has certainly enhanced that capability. But one of the questions that I've been presented with is, while that is providing more apartment, more purpose-built rental capacity, is it also providing, from the real estate sales perspective, a challenge to those people who are looking to buy that first home, to looking to move into those in the ownership market?
That's a fair question. It's a free market. So, if a house gets put for sale and the seller has the right to choose whichever offer comes in, and most times they don't know what the next purchaser is going to do. But I think on the whole, it's positive for the housing sector, period. Yes, it may be difficult for some folks to be able to get into their first home, but the developers are creating potentially 3 residences, right? And if it's done properly and if the zoning permits it, they could potentially be 3 separate parcels of land. It could be put into a condo, or it could be, if it's developed as a row house, you could potentially, instead of having 1 house, you have 3 houses that can be put for sale in the future. So I think it's positive. Again, it's a free market, so it's tough to. I think it's a very valid question, but I do believe that it's positive more than negative.
Thank you. And a follow-up to that, in your presentation, you actually specifically mentioned the development of 4plexes and 6plexes, which actually takes a step beyond the current new legislation, and that comes back to that municipal zoning and the requirements under that. In your area, are you seeing a lot of that size of development, or are you seeing more of the 1s and 2s?
More than 1s and 2s. We don't, for some reason, there's not a lot of that type of development yet. You drive 25 minutes to the east, you cross the border into Quebec. It's 6plexes, 4plexes. It's unbelievable. I can't emphasize it enough how different it is. As soon as you cross the border, driving on Old Highway 2, and you cross the border, and it's 4plexes and up, right almost from the border.
And I actually very much agree. I was there in that area recently, but I'm also noticing very similar developments happening in I'll call it the greater GTA, into the space that's being developed just outside on the fringes of the GTA. There's a lot of that small but multi-residential development going on. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
2.44, MPP Dowell.
Thank you, Chair, and I want to thank all the presenters for being here. I'd like to actually inquire with the Mr. Allen. The last couple of months, I've met with many healthcare providers in my community. All are saying the attraction of staff has been a real issue, and that the remaining staff are experiencing burnout. And I believe your presentation mentions that. But when it comes to the primary care providers, they keep on saying universally they're losing their nursing staff to hospitals. That it's a more attractive position, the wages are higher, there's benefits, there's just a greater compensation package. But it doesn't matter whether it's the endoscopy center or an urgent care center, the family health team, community health clinic, they all say the hospitals are attracting their workforce and that they can't compete with hospitals. And so I guess I'm trying to digest if the hospital compensation package is not sufficient for hospital workers, perhaps that's what's creating these vacancies where the primary care workers are moving up into those vacated positions. Is that what's happening? That is what's happening?
Well, there's a crisis right throughout. It's even worse on the community health center side. I almost wish I could have talked about that today. Yeah. We have a demonstration right now from home and community care workers out in front of the Treasury Board over this sort of issue. Watch Global at noon. And but that is a big problem on the community health side, is that even despite how we've lost so much in terms of wages to inflation in the hospital side and to other industries, it's even worse on the community health center side and the home care side.
So just
primary care.
Now, everyone involved in the management from the hospital side usually tells me we need to bolster our primary care, and I believe you would echo those comments.
We need to bolster every part of healthcare, including primary care.
Would primary care not be a better priority to bolster versus the hospital side to reduce the burnout for the hospital workers?
I would say we need a full-sided way to deal with the healthcare crisis. We need to bolster. On bad news I have for government today is we need money and funding, and it's right throughout that system. That's just the reality that we're in of a population growing and aging. It won't always be this way. At a certain point, that the aging dynamic will die off. We may not always have population growth like we have right now. Sorry.
That concludes that question, and also concludes the time for this panel. So we want to thank all the presenters in this panel for the time you took to prepare and the great way you presented it to us. So thank you very much. I'm sure it will be a great assistance.